Imagine a man fired over a $95,000 bonus. But within just 2 days, the bonus they tried to deny him would end up handing him a $50 million technology empire. Ethan Morales was halfway through his third beer when he leaned across the table at O'Grady's Tavern and said, "Graham, you have to tell them about Trent Whitmore." "Which story?" I asked, though I knew exactly what Ethan meant. "I am Graham Porter. 51 years old, 22 years Navy, graduated Annapolis in 2001. I spent most of my service on attack submarines doing signals intelligence work in places I still cannot talk about, and I earned a Bronze Star for some operations in the Persian Gulf that will stay classified until the day I die. These days, I drive a Ram 1500 Laramie and work in the defense contractor world, building encryption systems that keep American forces safe overseas." "All right," I said, settling back in the booth. "But you guys are not going to believe how this kid managed to hand me a $50 million company just because he could not stand the thought of me getting a performance bonus." The whole thing started on a Tuesday morning. I was in the conference room at Sentinel Forge Labs, briefing 3 Pentagon officials on our latest encryption protocol: Colonel Luis Delgado from Army Cyber Command, Dr. Elaine Mercer from DARPA, and Commander Nate Ellison from Naval Intelligence. Not exactly people you keep waiting. Trent Whitmore did not knock. The conference room door flew open like he owned the place, which, technically, his father did. He strutted in wearing a suit that probably cost more than most of these officers made in a month, looking like he had just stepped off a yacht. "Dad needs to wrap this up," he announced, not even acknowledging our guests. "I have real business to discuss. 22 years in the Navy teaches you to read situations fast. I had handled classified briefings with admirals who could end careers with a nod. But this was not tactical incompetence. This was deliberate disrespect." Colonel Delgado slowly looked up from his notes. Dr. Mercer stopped mid-sentence. Commander Ellison, who I had actually served with briefly in Riverton, just stared. These were not junior analysts. They were decision-makers on a $350 million defense contract, and this pampered brat had just dismissed them like they were interrupting his lunch. "Gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice steady the way they teach you at the academy, "perhaps we could reschedule for tomorrow morning?" After they left, stone-faced and clearly unimpressed, Trent plopped into the head chair like he had just conquered Europe. The silence stretched until he spoke. "Dad wants to see you in his office. Now." The walk to Gregory Whitmore's corner office felt like a death march. Trent strutted ahead, probably thinking he had just pulled off some masterful power play. What he did not know was that he had just triggered something that would eventually bring down their entire company. "You have to understand," I told the guys, "I had been at Sentinel Forge for 17 years. I started there fresh out of the Navy when we were just 12 engineers in a converted warehouse. Back then, Admiral Arthur Keene was still running things." Jack Sullivan leaned forward. "I remember Admiral Keene. Good man. Old school Navy. The best," I agreed. Keene understood something Trent never would: that the people who build the technology should control it, not the suits who inherit it. He had seen what happened when bean counters took over defense contractors. Good people got shown the door just to make quarterly numbers look better. About 10 years ago, Admiral Keene had pulled me aside after a company barbecue. We ended up at his house, sitting on his back deck with a bottle of bourbon, talking about the future of the company. "Graham," he said, "I am writing something special into your contract. That annual bonus you earn? Once it pays out, all intellectual property rights for our core encryption suite transfer to you. Legally and permanently." I nearly choked on my bourbon. "Admiral, what are you talking about?" "Protection," he said simply. "For you, for the technology, for everything we have built. The board cannot sell it, cannot give it away, cannot let some incompetent heir destroy it." At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. The company was solid, profitable, growing. But Admiral Keene had survived hostile takeovers and market crashes. He knew storms could come from anywhere. The clause was bulletproof, I explained to my Legion buddies. Keene had his old JAG lawyer draft it. As long as I stayed employed, the company kept their crown jewels. But if they ever fired me after the bonus processed, they'd lose everything, Jack finished. Exactly. Everything. That clause sat dormant for a decade. Every year, I would get my bonus, the IP rights would briefly transfer to me, then automatically revert when I showed up for work the next day. Clean, simple, legal. Admiral Keene called it insurance. But standing outside Gregory's office that Tuesday, listening to raised voices through the oak door, I knew Trent was about to change the game forever. Through the oak door, I could hear raised voices. Gregory Whitmore was fighting for his legacy. 6 months earlier, he had announced a merger with Black Ridge Defense Group, a $290 million deal that would make Sentinel Forge the leading cybersecurity contractor on the East Coast. The problem was, that merger depended entirely on the encryption suite I had built. See, the technology was not just software, it was a complete security architecture. The Pentagon had been using our systems for everything from drone communications to submarine fleet coordination. You could not just replace that overnight. The door opened. Gregory looked like he had aged 5 years in the past month. Trent came in behind me, practically vibrating with excitement. "Graham," Gregory said without pleasantries, "we are making some organizational changes." Trent stepped forward like he was accepting an Academy Award. "Effective immediately, your employment with Sentinel Forge is terminated." He slid a termination letter across the mahogany desk. Clean, professional, final. Dated exactly 48 hours before my $95,000 bonus was scheduled to pay out. I picked up the pen and signed without a word. No arguments. No protests. Just my signature on the dotted line. Trent had expected drama, shouting, pleading, maybe some desperate negotiation. Instead, I just stood up, straightened my tie, and headed for the door. "That is it?" Trent called after me. "No speech? No threats?" I turned back, looking him dead in the eye. "Good luck with the Black Ridge merger, son." His confusion was perfect. He had no idea what he had just done. So there I was, walking out of Sentinel Forge with a cardboard box of my personal belongings, escorted by HR like I was some kind of security risk. 22 years protecting classified submarine communications, and now I was being walked to the door by a 20-something HR rep who probably could not even find Riverton on a map. Jack Sullivan laughed. "Man, I have been there. Nothing worse than the perp walk when you know you have done nothing wrong." "But here is the thing," I said. The moment I got home, my phone started buzzing like a submarine sonar during a torpedo run. I had barely parked my Ram 1500 at my apartment complex when Ethan Morales himself called. "Graham, what the hell happened over there? Word is already spreading through the network that some punk kid fired you right before the Black Ridge deal." That is the thing about the Navy community around the Federal Commons, we are tight. When someone with my clearance level and track record suddenly becomes available, every defense contractor within 50 miles knows about it before the ink is dry on the termination papers. "Just Trent being Trent," I told Ethan. "Nothing I cannot handle. Brother, you built half the encryption systems the fleet runs on. If you are available, I have 3 projects at Northcrest that could use your expertise." "Still got your TS/SCI clearance? Current through next year." That was call number 1. Before I could even crack open a Budweiser, Jack Sullivan was on the line from his consulting firm. "Graham, heard you got the boot. Did Trent Whitmore lose his mind?" His son made the call. "Trent? That preppy little snake? Hell, Graham, he could not find his way out of a paper bag with a map and a GPS unit." What was Gregory thinking? I was starting to realize something Trent had not counted on. In just 24 hours, I already had 3 job offers from major defense contractors. The kid thought he was destroying my career. Instead, he had just advertised to the entire industry that Graham Porter was available. But the call that really mattered came while I was heating up leftover pizza. "Graham Porter? Speaking. This is Victor Langford with Black Ridge Defense Group. We need to talk." Now Victor was smart money. His company had been circling Sentinel Forge for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to make their move. His voice was tight, controlled like a submarine captain who had just detected an unknown contact. My legal team just flagged something in the merger documents, Victor continued. There is a personnel clause that names you specifically as essential to the technology transfer. It says if you are not with Sentinel Forge at closing, we have the right to walk away. I sat down at my kitchen table, looking at the countdown timer I had built on my computer. 47 hours, 23 minutes, and 14 seconds until bonus payment. That is interesting, Victor. Graham, I am going to ask you straight, are you still employed by Sentinel Forge? As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, no. The pause stretched long enough for me to grab my bottle of Woodford Reserve, the good stuff my daughter Maya had given me for my birthday. She was a junior at Kingsley University, studying international relations, Dean's List every semester. That $95,000 bonus was not just money to me. It was her spring semester tuition, and the final payment on my divorce settlement with Dana. Jesus, Victor finally said. Do they know about the clause? I doubt it. Trent never read the contracts. The kid is the type who schemes executive summaries and lets lawyers handle the details. Graham, what would it take to bring you on board with Blackridge directly? I watched the timer count down another minute. Let me think about it, Victor. Things might be changing in the next day or two. What kind of changes? The kind that make this conversation a lot more interesting. Ethan shook his head when I told the story. You didn't tell Victor about Admiral Keene's clause? Not yet, I said. I wanted to see how desperate they would get first. The next morning brought news alerts on my phone. Sentinel Forge stock down 8% on merger uncertainty. Some analyst had caught wind of personnel changes and started asking uncomfortable questions about the technology transfer. By the time I finished my morning coffee, Trent Whitmore was calling. His voice had lost all the swagger from the day before. Graham, we need to talk. I'm listening. There seems to be some confusion about your termination. Maybe we were too hasty. I almost laughed out loud. Confusion like accidentally firing your chief architect was just a clerical error. What kind of confusion, Trent? Blackridge's lawyers are asking questions. About some clause in the merger documents. About your role in the technology transfer. Ah, I said, taking another sip of coffee. Section 12, subsection 4. Personnel continuity requirements. You know about it? Trent, I helped write that clause. Blackridge insisted on it during negotiations. They wanted assurance that key technical personnel would remain through the integration period. The silence on the other end was beautiful. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how he had missed something so important. Look, Graham, maybe we can work something out. Reinstatement, back pay, maybe even a retention bonus. I'm not coming back, Trent. What do you mean you're not coming back? Graham, this is your life's work. This is your company. No, I said quietly. This was my company. Now it's just another place where people make bad decisions. And with that, I hung up the phone. After I hung up, I called my daughter. Hey, Dad. Maya's voice was bright, cheerful. How's work? Funny you should ask, sweetheart. I just became unemployed. What? Dad, what happened? I told her the story, keeping it simple, how Trent Whitmore had made a power play, fired me right before my bonus, and now the whole company was in chaos. That's terrible, Dad. Are you going to be okay? What about my tuition? And that's when it really hit me. Trent hadn't just tried to humiliate me, he had tried to mess with my daughter's future. Maya had worked her tail off to get into Kingsley University. She had dreams of working in international relations, maybe even the State Department someday. Don't worry about tuition, kiddo. Dad's got it handled. And Maya, I'm proud of you. Not just for your grades, but for the way you've handled everything with the divorce, with me being deployed so much when you were younger. You turned out better than your old man deserved. Dad, don't say that. You taught me about integrity. About doing the right thing even when it's hard. After I hung up, I sat back and thought about those words. Integrity. Admiral Keene had built that clause to protect integrity, the integrity of the technology, the company, and the people who did the real work. Trent started panicking. By afternoon, the calls were coming every hour. Gregory Whitmore himself, sounding desperate, Blackridge's lawyers, asking pointed questions about intellectual property ownership, even a reporter from Defense Week who had somehow gotten my number. And you just let them sweat? Jack Sullivan asked. I let them sweat, I said. Because I had something more important to do. That evening, I drove over to Honor Heights Memorial Cemetery. I walked down to Admiral Arthur Keene's grave, section 60, not far from where they bury the recent war dead. I stood there for about an hour, watching the sun set over the river. Admiral, I said quietly, I think your insurance policy's about to pay off. The guys at O'Grady's fell silent when I told them this part. We all understood that feeling the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that someone who had served before us had trusted us with something important. 24 hours to go, Ethan said softly. 24 hours, I agreed. And Trent still had no idea what was coming. The next morning, my phone was buzzing like a fire alarm. Sentinel Forge stock opened down 18%. The financial press was having a field day with the story. Jack whistled low. 18%? That's blood in the water. And the sharks were circling, I said. Blackridge Defense had just announced they were reviewing certain aspects of the pending merger. Translation, they were getting ready to walk. I ignored most of the calls and went for my usual 5-mile run through Riverton, past the memorials, past the Federal Commons, past all the places that reminded me why the work mattered. The encryption systems I had built weren't just software. They protected American lives, Navy ships in the South China Sea, Army units in Syria, Air Force drones over Afghanistan. When I got back, a black sedan was parked outside my apartment building. Gregory Whitmore sat in the back seat, looking like he had aged a decade overnight. Graham, he said as I approached, still in my running gear. Please. 5 minutes. I got in the car. Gregory had always been straight with me, even when his son was being an idiot. Military men understand chains of command and personal accountability. My son made a mistake, Gregory said without preamble. A catastrophic, career-ending mistake. Gregory, I've got nothing against you personally. You've always treated me fair. But Trent crossed a line. He's young. Stupid. Arrogant. Gregory rubbed his face with both hands. But Graham, this company employs 400 people. Good people. Engineers, technicians, support staff. People with mortgages and kids in college. I studied his face. The desperation was real. Gregory had built this company from what Admiral Keene left behind, and now he was watching his son tear it apart. What exactly are you asking me to do, Gregory? Come back. Work with us. Help us get through this merger. Name your terms: salary, equity, whatever you want. Trent will be reassigned. Permanently. I checked my watch. 6 hours, 14 minutes until bonus payment. Gregory, in about 6 hours, none of this is going to matter. Not the merger, not the stock price, not Trent's future. The game's about to change completely. What are you talking about? Ask Admiral Keene's old lawyer. Check the contracts from 2014. Read Section 9 of my employment agreement. His face went pale. Gregory was sharp enough to know that when someone cites a specific contract section, it's not good news. Graham. What's in Section 9? The reason Trent should have fired me in January, not October. I got out of the car and headed upstairs. Behind me, Gregory was already on his phone, probably calling every lawyer in the building. 4 hours later, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Porter, this is Sandra Lee, General Counsel for Sentinel Forge. Her voice was professional, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. "Mr. Porter, we need to discuss Section 9 of your employment contract." "I'm listening." "According to our records, you have a performance bonus scheduled for payment in approximately 2 hours. And according to Section 9, payment of that bonus triggers a transfer of intellectual property rights for the core encryption suite." "That's correct." The pause on the other end stretched long enough for me to pour myself 3 fingers of Woodford Reserve. "Mr. Porter, are you willing to negotiate? We're prepared to offer significant compensation, stock options, cash settlements, executive positions." "With Trent still in management?" "No thank you. Mr. Porter, Trent will be removed from any operational role. Permanently." I almost laughed. "Sandra, Trent should have been removed years ago. Gregory couldn't bring himself to do it. Why should I believe anything has changed now?" But Herace, what I didn't tell Sandra, what I couldn't tell her. That conversation wasn't really about negotiation. It was about something bigger. I paused, taking a drink, looking around at my fellow veterans in the pub as I told the story. "You guys understand duty, honor, country. Admiral Keene didn't just write that clause to protect me. He wrote it to protect the technology. To make sure it stayed in the right hands, serving the right purpose. The encryption suite wasn't just a corporate asset. It was a shield protecting American forces overseas." Ethan nodded slowly. "And Trent never understood that." "Not for a second," I said. "To Trent, it was just another product to monetize." At 4:47 that afternoon, sitting in my apartment with my laptop open, I watched the countdown timer hit 0. The computer chimed softly, the same automated system I had built years ago to track bonuses and IP transfers. "Transfer complete. All rights to Encryption Suite version 4.2 and associated technologies now held by Graham Porter, individual proprietor." 47 pages of legal documentation, all culminating in one simple fact: I now owned the technology that made Sentinel Forge valuable. Trent had tried to deny me $95,000. Instead, he had handed me intellectual property worth about $50 million. My phone rang immediately. "Victor Langford." "Graham, my legal team just confirmed it. You own the encryption suite." "I do." "You know what this means?" "I've got a pretty good idea." Victor's voice had excitement now, energy. "Graham, we've been planning this merger for 2 years. Spent $8 million in legal fees, due diligence, integration planning. But Herace the thing, I'm not angry. I'm impressed." "How's that?" "Because now I can deal directly with the person who actually built the technology, instead of going through a bunch of suits who don't understand what they're selling." That evening, I drove over to Kingsley University to see Maya. I found her in the library, buried in international relations textbooks, working on a paper about cybersecurity and national defense. "Dad." She jumped up and hugged me. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected, sweetheart." I told her about the day's events carefully, without going into classified details. But I wanted her to understand something important. "Maya, sometimes in life, people are going to try to knock you down. Try to make you feel small, worthless, expendable. When that happens, you remember 2 things. First, your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you. Second, the best response isn't anger or revenge. It's patience and preparation." She smiled. "You sound like Admiral Keene. He taught me a lot about planning for the long term." Jack Sullivan leaned forward at O'Grady's. "So what did Victor offer?" I grinned. "An exclusive licensing agreement. Minimum guarantee of $75 million over 5 years. Equity participation. Complete creative control." The table went quiet for a moment, every man letting the numbers sink in. "And Trent?" Ethan asked. "Trent called 6 more times that night. Each message more desperate than the last. By the end, he was practically begging. The final voicemail was the best, Trent's voice cracking, all the arrogance gone. "Graham, please call me back. My father's career, my future, 400 jobs, it's all falling apart. We can fix this. We can make this right. I shook my head. But some things can't be fixed. Some mistakes have consequences that go beyond apologies and settlements. The next morning, the news hit like a tsunami. Defense contractor acquires encryption technology in direct deal, bypasses merger. The headline was everywhere: financial outlets, national news, even trending online. By 9 a.m., the story was the only thing people in the industry were talking about. Stock opened down 43%, I told the guys. Trading was halted twice in the first hour. Ethan whistled low. 43%? Trent must have been losing his mind. The press conference was scheduled for noon. Gregory Whitmore stood behind a podium at Sentinel Forge headquarters, looking like a general who had just lost his entire command. The words he had to say were probably the hardest of his career. Yesterday, Sentinel Forge lost the rights to our core encryption technology due to a personnel decision made by my son, Trent Whitmore. This decision was made without board approval and without understanding the contractual implications. I watched it live from my new corner office at Blackridge Defense Group. Bigger than my old one, with a better view of the river, and filled with engineers who actually wanted to be there. As a result, Gregory continued, his voice barely steady, Trent has been terminated from his position and will have no future role in this company. I want to publicly apologize to Graham Porter, whose termination was unjustified and has caused irreparable harm to our company and our shareholders. Mr. Porter served Sentinel Forge with distinction for 17 years and deserved far better treatment. Trent wasn't at the press conference. Word around the industry was that security had escorted him from the building that morning, his company credit cards canceled, his access revoked. Some trust fund kid finally learned that daddy's name only protects you so far. What happened to Trent after that? Jack asked. I leaned back in my chair. Funny thing about the defense world, word travels fast, and memory is even longer. Nobody would touch him. Last I heard, he moved out to California to start some cryptocurrency venture. Something about revolutionizing blockchain. The guys at O'Grady's laughed. We had all seen plenty of young hotshots who thought they could reinvent the fundamentals without understanding them. But the real payoff came that afternoon when my daughter called. Dad, I just saw the news. Are you kidding me? You own the entire encryption system now? That's right, sweetheart. Dad, I am so proud of you. Not because of the money, but because you didn't let them push you around. You stood up for what you built. I smiled. Your old man's got a few tricks left, kiddo. What happens now? I looked around my new office. 15 of Sentinel Forge's best engineers had already joined Blackridge. The entire naval intelligence team I had built over the years. They wanted to work with me, not whoever Sentinel brought in to replace me. Now, I said, we build something better. We've got government contracts worth $500 million over the next 5 years. And your tuition's paid through law school if you want it. Later that week, Victor Langford knocked on my office door around closing time. Graham, got a minute? Sure, what's up? I just got off the phone with Admiral Morrison at the Pentagon. They want to fast-track our submarine communications contract. Apparently, they're impressed with how we handled the transition. That felt better than the money, better than the equity, better than watching Trent's world collapse. Knowing that the work still mattered, that American forces would still have the best encryption technology in the world. There's something else, Victor continued. The Admiral wants to establish a scholarship program. For military families. Kids whose parents served. He wants you to help run it. I thought about Admiral Keene. About the values he had tried to protect. About Maya, working late in that Kingsley library, chasing her dreams because her father had once chosen to serve his country. I nodded. I'd be honored. Jack raised his glass back at O'Grady's. So what's the moral of the story, Graham? I paused, considering. The moral? Read your contracts. Know your worth. And remember, the people who try to diminish you usually end up diminishing themselves. And? Ethan prompted. And sometimes, I said with a grin, losing your job is the best thing that ever happens to you. 3 months later, Sentinel Forge filed for bankruptcy. The remaining patents were sold off to pay creditors. Gregory Whitmore retired quietly to his house on the vineyard. The engineers who had followed me to Blackridge were already building the next generation of defense encryption technology. But the story didn't end there. Last month, I got a call from a young Navy lieutenant, fresh out of the academy, working submarine communications at Norfolk. His name was Alex Morrison, Admiral Morrison's grandson. "Mr. Porter, I'm starting my transition to civilian life next year. I've heard about what you're building at Blackridge. Any chance you might have room for another submarine guy?" "Lieutenant, there's always room for good people who understand the mission. That's the thing about military values, they don't retire when you take off the uniform. Honor, duty, service to something bigger than yourself." Admiral Keene understood that. Trent never did. These days, when young engineers ask me for advice, I tell them the same thing Admiral Keene told me 20 years ago: be too valuable to lose and too dangerous to cross. Build something that matters. Protect what's important. And always read your contracts. The $95,000 bonus Trent had tried to deny me hit my account exactly when it was supposed to. Contract law doesn't care about office politics. But that money was just the trigger. The real payoff was everything that came after. Maya graduated summa cum laude last spring. She's starting law school at Kingsley this fall, specializing in international trade and defense policy. Smart girl, she understands that technology and national security go hand in hand. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's just being patient enough to let other people's bad decisions catch up with them. Trent thought he was playing chess. Turns out, he was just moving pieces around while I was playing an entirely different game. We raised our glasses at O'Grady's to Admiral Keene, to second chances, and to the lesson that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is someone showing you exactly who they really are. These days, the timer on my computer counts up instead of down. Every second is a reminder: patience beats panic, preparation beats politics, and sometimes the person who tries to destroy your career ends up handing you the keys to something much better. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead. This isn't where my journey ends. It's where something far greater begins. And I'm grateful you're here to share it with me.